If I mispronounce anything, I accept my apologies. In 1972, my father was fishing in a place called the Mahata River, where it meets the Pacific Ocean. He said he saw something that day which he would never tell anybody else because he knows they wouldn't believe him. Then he smirks and says that heck, he wasn't sure he believed it now that so much time had passed and it was such a crazy thing to see. He said that it had been extra warm that summer, which might have had something to do with the creatures he saw all ending up in the same area at the same time. Anyways, he said he had just got out there to drop a line in the water when he happened to see an amazing sight. The orcas had accumulated there off the beach, not far from where he had planned on fishing. The water was alive with wakes, spins, and even the occasional jump out of the water, followed by a huge splashdown. Clearly, the ocean mammals were not trying to hide their presence. It was sorta a misty, rainy type day, but it remained warm. That right off the bat made it rather strange because usually if the sun wasn't shining and it was misting or raining, then usually it was chilly, if not cold, even in the summer months. This day was different, however. My family has roots near the Kansas-Missouri border. Father said the day reminded him of one of our really humid days, when you couldn't wear a t-shirt outside for more than 30 minutes without it being nearly soaked in sweat. He said it was like that, which also meant the air was heavy. As if those conditions were driven far enough to the extreme, it can become very, very difficult for even a healthy person to be able to catch their breath. You get the feeling that although your lungs are taking air in and out as usual, that there simply is no oxygen available. That the air is just carbon dioxide, probably carbon monoxide, but certainly no oxygen in it. Even a breeze is no help when the air is so thick and foreign. His father wondered if the animals were as bothered by the humidity as he was affected. On the beach down the way were a bunch of seals or sea lions all gathered for a nap. Closer, the place just beyond where he had planned to fish, was a spot where the orcas seemed to be coming in from out of the ocean. Then he could see why. The orcas were chasing seals toward the beach, and then they were going as fast as they could get there. They would grab a seal and take it out to the ocean where it couldn't get away. There would be 2 or 3 which would break away from the rest of the pod, and they would go out there with that seal, and it really got gruesome after that. Orcas are a lot like wolves. They are really cool the way they work together and are part of a tight group which are completely devoted to their pack or pod, depending upon what you're talking about. However, they are also very much alike in their extremely brutal manner they go about their business. Wolves will chase their prey until it is so exhausted it cannot go any further. It has no strength remaining left to fight. Meanwhile, the wolves have tagged in and out of the ongoing chase, so the prey gets exhausted, while they are only involved in exerting calories for short stints at any given time. The wolves stay fresh while the prey just gets weaker with exhaustion, and in the end the prey is most often eaten alive by the wolf pack. Killer whales are equally as brutal. They will take a seal out to the open sea where it cannot get away. Then they will tenderize it by whacking it up into the air, oftentimes 40 or more feet up and perhaps twice that distance before they come back down. But wait, sometimes they do not make it back into the water because another of the orcas will be there to whack it back up into the air again, using that powerful tail. It is undeniably impressive to see these powerful animals capable of positioning themselves so to be in the right spot where to whack the seal back up into the air. It is no less impressive than watching a professional baseball player step up to the plate and face 100-mile-an-hour fastballs, especially when you also consider the orcas have a better batting average and they have to swim to the spot where the pitch is going to land. At times you can see them teaching their young using the extremely beaten seals, which have very little life left in them after getting whacked so many times by those powerful tails. They will let their young chase the injured seals as practice for hunting for when they get older. So my father watched the orcas come in chasing some of the seals. Sometimes they would catch them, sometimes the seals would escape. The orcas didn't seem all that focused on the hunt. It seemed like it was more play for them, or perhaps they were warming up. Anyway, that is until he saw the extremely tall men, whom he quickly was able to conclude were not men at all, but something else. Something which was bigger than any man. They had broader shoulders, a thicker chest. They had a stride which covered twice the distance of any man, body covered in reddish-brown hair which was hard to guess how long due to the distance, but he would have started guessing at about 8 inches to maybe a foot. Some of the Sasquatch had slightly darker or slightly lighter colored hair or fur, as you care to term it. The same could be said of the length. He thought some looked longer than on some than on others, and it did not seem to be a matter of size as to the length of the hair or fur. Of course, this all was concluded based on just 6 of them to observe. His position in relation to the big hairy creatures was off to their side and slightly behind them, as they were facing out toward the open ocean. He watched as they looked out over the water. Then one of them let go a roar, which was, to Father's absolute amazement, seemed to get the attention of the orcas. They had been playing out in the calmer part of the water, the part before you get out to the open ocean where the waves are still coming in from some far away place on the horizon. The orcas had found a place to congregate which did not demand a lot of energy to be spent swimming against a current or a tide. They were playing in an area where the water wasn't like glass, but it was calm for the location and condition. The big hairy bipedal that let go another roar, and then it stood watching as the water out in front of it began to boil with the arrival of several seals, which had a crew of killer whales racing behind them. The water, which had been mostly calm, was now rapidly rising in a surge of power as the mighty killer whales rose up out of the water with their mouths open, teeth ready to clamp upon the fleeing seals. In their rush to avoid the orca teeth, the seals get pushed up onto the beach by the powerful surge of water forced by the team when they come up out of the water in unison. Now you can call it brutal and say it is extreme. Admittedly, it is all that and worse, but it is at the same time a very beautiful sight to experience. Such power, agility, ability, and capability all coming from creatures which work in perfect unison that would make any football team envious of their ability to act and react in relationship to what the other is doing. It is a ballet of blood, a dance of the dead and the soon-to-be. He said he saw the orcas come up on the beach to grab some of the seals, but that was not what was amazing him. He said as the seals were arriving on the beach, the big and very hairy beings came running out to meet them. Then there was another one, and then another one. Before concluded, Father said he had counted 6 of the big hairy beasts. 2 were of smaller size, which he guessed might have been teenagers. They all raced out onto the beach in what could only be a planned, surprised attack. Upon seeing the huge hairy beasts, the seals began to turn to go back out to the sea, which was where the truly ugly part of the trap is then revealed, because by then the orcas had come in and they were quickly finding position to grab them. The beach quickly became stained in a morose maroon color from all the seal blood sprayed and splattered on the sand and in the fading ocean, which sought nothing more than to return to whence it had come, but not before gaining a new color and a scent which would quickly draw the sharks. It was quite a sight, seeing the seals trying so hard to escape, and just when they think they are arriving safe on the beach, they catch a glimpse of what was waiting for them on the loose sand, causing them to quickly turn their back to go back out into the water where the orcas were waiting for them. Those tall, hairy creatures had those seals more frightened than they were of the killer whales, which were hot on their tails. Father said he was left to wonder, do they work together to hunt the seals, or did they just happen upon an extreme event which happened to be due to coincidence or simple luck? His opinion, based on how they interacted together in such a perfectly timed attack that had the seals literally delivering themselves right to the orcas, it sure looked like teamwork. For instance, there was no fighting over the prey between the two parties. Yes, killer whales are definitely apex predators that have no other animals to fear, save the fact there are a couple of whale species that might provide argument to that statement. But for the most part, it is fair to say that they are at the top of their food chain. And so can it be said of the Sasquatch. In fact, they have never lost a member of their species to the dreaded human beings. The same cannot be said of the killer whales. So even though the orcas are bigger and they would certainly win in a battle in the water, the opposite is true out of the water. The Sasquatch has the definite upper hand in that case. But what if the two apex predators did not compete, but rather worked as a team? As frightening as the thought of encountering one of them in the wild would be scary or at the least attention-getting, Imagine finding yourself sandwiched between the orcas arriving in attack mode, while at the same time the Bigfoot is waiting to get his hands on you. Now that would be a scary moment. And it was exactly what the poor seals were experiencing while my father watched it all unfold. He said he saw one of the Bigfoot with a seal thrown over one shoulder, and another further up the sand was giving one of the dead seals to an orca, which was waiting to collect it. Sitting at the edge of the beach was yet the biggest orca, which had a seal in its own mouth, and which was struggling to get away, but it appeared to be a futile effort. The big black and white overgrown dolphin crunched the seal until it stopped struggling. And then came a big surprise, as one of the Sasquatch handed over another dead seal, and this killer whale accepted it, and then it had 2 seals in its mouth. What was perhaps most amazing was how the orca seemed to be staying still while some sort of exchange happened between it and the Bigfoot. It was like they were talking, but of course that is ridiculous. Whatever they were doing, they finished after about 15 minutes, and the orca was then pushed by 3 of the Bigfoot back out into the water. It was an amazing sight. But wait, they were not finished. Suddenly another group of seals were making the water boil, and then it happened just as before. This time there were 7 big killer whales which rose up out of the water, which caused the seals to scamper in an attempt to get away from the big surprise attack. And as the mighty orcas snapped their heads, mouths open, teeth ready to grasp whatever unfortunate seal was to be had, the big hairy beasts which were waiting on the beach began to reach out and grab the seals, which were lucky enough to get past the bites of the killer whales. A seal was snatched out of midair as it wriggled in a struggle to get its body into a position to allow it to keep moving once it hit the ground. Sadly for that particular seal, its days of escaping were through. The huge hairy beasts took the seal, and they let it slide away from their grasp until just the end of the flippers could be grabbed, and then the mighty beast swung the poor seal over and around its head until sufficient speed was accumulated, and then it was smashed against the hard, water-hardened sand that gave just slightly more than concrete. It was likely over for that seal. And my father said after seeing that, he was positive they were working as a team. How they managed to communicate to be able to arrange their combined attack, which was perfectly timed so the seals could neither escape by going further up on the sand, and they could not escape back into the water since the orcas were right there waiting. How did the orcas and the Bigfoot know when to meet each other? Surely they did not have a time arranged, yet here they were, acting as a team and being much more successful than if they had been hunting without the help of the other. And the poor seals didn't know what hit them. They are certainly accustomed to being hunted by both the killer whales and great white sharks, also have them as a main food source. It is also possible they have been hunted by the Sasquatch and have a plan of escape for when it comes around. Clearly, however, the seals did not have any sort of escape plan for when the 2 entities worked together. My father said he hung around until the Sasquatch pushed the big orca back out into the ocean, while it held the 2 seals in its mouth. The Sasquatch, having seen the orca back to the sea, turned around, and the 3 gathered up their seals and disappeared into the wilderness with a seal thrown over each shoulder. A couple of the Sasquatch had more than 2 seals thrown over their shoulders. How much does a seal weigh? 150 pounds? He wasn't sure, but he figured some of the creatures were toting 400 to 600 pounds, comfortably. He said the way that they acted among each other, it was very mindful of watching a group of humans that had come together to get a bunch of free food, and it had worked out perfectly. They almost looked like they were laughing or joking with each other. He observed one Sasquatch handing over a seal to another Sasquatch. Of course, he had no way of knowing what sort of significance was served. Did they split everything up evenly? He wasn't sure, but he did observe that the biggest of them did not necessarily get the most spoils. However, he said the big one did get plenty to carry away with him wherever it was that he went. Since they each came so easily, one might wonder, do they have a get-together like humans do? And say, for instance, when we catch a bunch of fish and have a fish fry? Perhaps the act of getting together for the hunt was their idea of a get-together for eating purposes. It is also possible that they do indeed gather someplace unknown to the humans where they can enjoy their version of a dinner gathering. One also wonders, did the orcas go off to someplace where they frequent for eating? Perhaps someplace where they not only gather to eat but also share their plunder. How do these 2 very different species, which have so little in common, yet have so much in common, ever find a way to arrange such a perfect union for hunting? One is completely saltwater bound, while the other is at best slightly designed for being in the water. It is fair to argue that the Sasquatch do not spend a lot of time in the water beyond that which occupies swamps and probably other stagnant bodies. It's really quite fascinating. It also is far from being the only example of two species which come together to accomplish a common goal. What the ultimate question for me is, how did the two parties ever get together in the first place? My best guess is simple coincidence, and that both species just remembered how well the hunt had worked for them when they came together, and they came back the next year at the same time and discovered so did the other one. It's quite likely it was a learned action and which is taught to their offspring. When the hunt was finished and the last orca pushed back out to sea, the Sasquatch disappeared into the cover of the forest, the same way the ocean kept the secret destination of the killer whales after they left the killing fields. My father said he could finally get some fishing done. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please subscribe. It is appreciated. And a like would be great too. Godspeed to all.